Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Clements. I'm the co-founder and National Director of Psychological Services at the Centre for Corporate Health, and welcome to today's session on strengthening personal resilience. I think, at this time when we're going through COVID-19 and a lot of change is all around us, this is absolutely no better time to be using some of these skills and these strategies that we're going to learn in the session today. So just in terms of where you may be in this COVID-19 journey, I imagine that many of you are all now working remotely. I imagine that your personal lives and your work lives have been turned upside down in the last few weeks. And I imagine that you might be currently wearing a lot of different hats. You might even be doing homeschooling. You might have had to restrict your social life a little bit, and obviously your work life as well. So really, as we go through today's session, these skills that I'm going to show you today are a lot of evidence-based, a lot of science behind these strategies to really equip you to be able to apply some of these strategies, not just to your situations now during COVID-19 as we are managing this pandemic, but after that as well, as we go through changes in our lives, personal changes, work-related changes. Let's face it, life is all about change. Unfortunately, now we've got more of an unprecedented change for us to learn how to manage and navigate our way through. So, in terms of just kicking off today's session, I'd like to share with you a little bit on the wellbeing journey that we've been studying here at the Centre for Corporate Health. And we've been really researching and studying how are people progressing through COVID-19 and what are some of those wellbeing stages that people are progressing through right now. And this is just to start off the session today, and then we'll go into a lot of the strategies. But firstly, if you kind of cast your mind back to the beginning of COVID-19 and have a think about some of those initial feelings and reactions that you would have been experiencing, probably many of you would identify with the first one there around anxiety, fear, panic, worry. I think that that's a very common response that we all had initially as we had to transition our work lives, we had to transition our personal lives, and we had to transition basically everything very, very fast, made some very quick pivots within our whole lives. And this meant that we were really going with a lot of energy. We were going 100 miles an hour and using our fight or flight reactions a lot during that stage of that anxiety and that fear and that worry. So that's really the first stage that we saw people progress through. That lasted, I would say we saw people in that stage for around 7 to 8 weeks. And even now, we still see some people in that stage right now. So it's very normal to still feel anxiety and worry from time to time. What we're actually seeing right now is kind of people entering in stage 2, which is what we call languishing. This is a time of tiredness. We've used up a lot of energy in phase 1 with the fight or flight reactions. And this is really a stage of tiredness of, even some people are saying, I feel really burned out. Some people are even saying to me, I'm feeling as if it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning. I'm feeling it hard to be motivated. So this stage of tiredness is understandable because we've used up a lot of energy in phase 1, but we really have to learn how to navigate our way through phase 2. Because if we don't come through that stage successfully, that can play out into that psychological state of languishing. It's hard to concentrate, it's hard to focus, it's hard for my memory to, operate at its best when we're languishing. And that can definitely help us to facilitate into unhelpful states like depression or low mood. So phase 2 is also a time though of energy conservation and of energy renewal, because we're going to need that as we progress into stage 3. And stage 3 we call more thriving. This is where we're going to have a renewed sense of energy. We're going to have a renewed sense of hope, of optimism, of positivity, of looking towards the future. And we're going to have our energy back and be able to, move forward through this. So this is as we're transitioning. We're in our temporary normal right now. This is a transition phase. It's a temporary phase. It's not our forever phase. We're heading towards the future. We're just not quite sure yet what that future may end up looking like and when we may actually come into that future state. But what we are predicting that as we head to what we're calling our new normal, because I don't think our lives will ever be the same as it was pre-COVID-19, so we're referring to this as our new normal. And we're predicting that all of those wellbeing phases that we just went through are going to come back again. So as soon as we start to travel on public transport, as soon as our children are going to be heading back to school, as soon as we start to transition back to the workplace, it's very normal that we're going to feel some fear, some anxiety, some worry, some tension, and maybe even feeling as if we're feeling a bit panicky as well. We are then going to see us come into that state of tiredness again, of exhaustion, as we're used to living our very, very small life right now, our tiny little life. Now we're going to come back into our full lives. And we are going to, let's face it, we're probably not match fit yet to be really transitioning into that phase just yet. So that's going to take a lot of energy with the commuting. We're not used to commuting. We haven't commuted now for a couple of months. So as we start to run children around to school and after school activities, as we start to do our work, I think we're definitely going to see that state of languishing and tiredness and fatigue come in again, and then eventually we're going to be through COVID-19. Eventually we will come out of the other end. It's temporary, we're just not exactly sure when, and that's where we're going to have that renewed sense of energy and hope and optimism towards the future again. So I just wonder what stage you're in right now, and maybe if you just take a moment to reflect on this as the wellbeing journey for COVID-19, and take a moment just to maybe even jot down where you see yourself right now in terms of COVID-19 and the change that we're going through this wellbeing journey. And all of these phases are completely normal, and people are very fluid across these phases as well. So one day you might feel as if you're anxious and worried and keyed up and tense. The next day you might feel as if you're actually at hope and optimism and got energy and a bit of vigour. And then the next day you might feel as if you're tired and exhausted. So these stages are very, very fluid. So suffice to say, the changes that we're all going through right now are tiring, they are fatiguing, and it's a little bit like running a marathon. I'm using a lot the marathon analogy now, that it is a little bit like a marathon right now, and we need to be able to pace ourselves along the journey of this marathon. If we're going to sprint the marathon, we may not make it, we may not last the distance, but it's about learning sustainable ways right now as to how we can actually pace ourselves along the marathon. And I was just listening to the 7:30 report last week, and the infectious diseases experts were also using the analogy of the marathon, and that they had asked these experts, how far along the marathon do you think we are? And right now people were saying, those infectious diseases experts were saying, we're about 1 kilometre along the marathon, we've got about 41 more kilometres to go. So it's just really resonated with me around, we just need to be able to pace ourselves along this journey and look after ourselves. And that's really what today's program is about, learning some skills to really look after yourselves and maintain your resilience and well-being as we go through this. So a big part of resilience, before we get into a lot of the content, is just having self-awareness. And I think that that's a huge key to resilience and well-being, is actually knowing where you're at. And especially right now, because our well-being is very, very, very fluid. It's changing on a day-by-day basis. It's really important to be able to have that awareness and have some time, even if it's just 5 minutes once a day, to be able to check in on yourself. Where am I in the wellbeing continuum? Am I feeling as if I'm pretty good? I'm feeling as if I'm at a 1 on the wellbeing scale. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm kicking some goals. I'm feeling great. Or am I maybe, a 2? I've got some wellbeing challenges, but I can cope. I can handle things. I'm okay. I know I'm not at my best, but I'm doing all right. Am I maybe more halfway? There's a lot going on and the stress is starting to show, but I'm staying above the line, I'm all right. Or am I more, there's a lot going on in my life and it's starting to affect now other areas of my life? Or really am I at that level where I just don't feel I can, keep going? I'm not feeling quite myself right now. So this is around having that self-awareness of where you would place yourself on this wellbeing journey as well. And really being able to have that self-awareness. One of the keys to resilience is actually self-awareness. And what I often find is where people are actually, quite high performing and high achieving, we actually have our attention on everybody else. We have our attention, I call it being very other focused. We're focused on other people, our deadlines, our tasks, our students, when things are due, our internal stakeholders. And we lose that self-awareness of ourselves. So we know that it's not really helpful to be living in these kinds of stages for a long time If people are feeling as if I'm starting to live there and this is becoming my new normal now for a week or a couple of weeks, then that's probably that time to reach out and get some professional assistance. You've got your employee assistance program at Macquarie University where you can access that assistance and support. But right now it's also about just being able to have that self-awareness for yourself. When am I starting to shift? Maybe from my stress has been helpful into now stress is harmful. Not only for yourselves personally, but also keeping an eye out on your staff, on your colleagues, on those around you as well. So this whole piece about self-awareness is actually very, very important. So training yourself to have self-awareness, to be able to check in on yourself and just taking a moment to reflect on where am I? And this is actually a core competency right now, given that well-being is so fluid along this well-being continuum right now. So this is a little bit of an opportunity for you to maybe pause this video at this time just for a couple of minutes and maybe answer some of these questions around, firstly, where am I? How am I tracking? What am I noticing in myself around about my well-being right now? Where am I? What kind of number would I give myself? What kind of rating scale? What is most challenging for me right now? What's the biggest challenge that I'm having with respect to my well-being right now? Is it that I'm finding it difficult to turn off at the end of the day? Is it that I'm feeling as if I'm wearing a lot of hats during the day and I'm absolutely exhausted and depleted at the end of the day? Is it that I feel as if I can't sleep? I'm not sleeping as well because my mind's very active, or I'm waking up in the middle of the night and I'm worrying. What is your biggest well-being challenge right now? And be able to reflect on that and write that down. And your third part around what's your goal for the session? What would you really like to have answered by the end of this session? What would you really like to get out of today's session? So this is the moment just to pause the video just for a moment, take a moment to answer some of those questions, and it's just that self-reflection piece to be able to reflect on some of those questions. So once you've done that exercise, before we get on to some of the content today, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about change and what happens to us as we're going through change, and why as humans we feel as if change sometimes has an incredible toll on our well-being. And actually, as humans, we don't really like change, whether it's organisational change, whether it's change that might have come up suddenly out of the blue in our personal life, whether it's change in COVID-19. Well, life throws us curveballs all the time. And as humans, we inherently don't really like change. So why is that? And what actually happens to us when we're going through change? So I love this little depiction here of the various houses. I don't know if any of you have ever renovated a house before. In terms of, and if you have, you probably know it's incredibly stressful. So often we have our current state, and our current state is not perfect. You know, it's definitely not, it's far from perfect. There might be a hole in the roof. There might be a broken window. There might be the door that's slightly coming off its hinges. It's not perfect, but psychologically, we become very attached to the current state. We love that current state because it gives us a few things that I'll talk about in a moment that we really become very psychologically attached to. What happens during change, whether it's organisational change, whether it's change in your personal life, whether it's change during COVID-19, we're thrust very suddenly into a phase of transition where we are suddenly out in the wilderness a little bit. Usually we're given a big push out into this transition stage. And this is where we all find ourselves right now. We're in a transition to a new normal. We don't know where it's going to end. We don't know what it's going to look like. And hence we're heading towards a future state. And a lot of the time when we head towards a future state, you know, we have the hope that it's going to be bright, it's going to be shiny, it's going to be better, it's going to be okay, it's going to be more efficient or more effective, and it looks pretty good. But a lot of the time we just don't know when that future state's going to arrive, or really what that future state might actually look like. So the transition time is where we need to really be able to prioritise our well-being. And if you're a leader or a manager, being able to prioritise not only your own well-being, but your team's well-being as well. Because if people are not having psychological well-being as a core competency, and I liken psychological well-being in any high-performing, high-achieving environment to anything like a task-related competency is just something that I need to get good at, because we know these days, given the amount of change that we're all going through, we cannot take our psychological well-being for granted. We actually have to have it as a core competency that we need to get good at well-being. That means we need to do something effortful, something intentional, and something conscious almost every single day to stay on the well side of our well-being. And I think that's an interesting concept, that these days we actually have to work at staying well. So in our jobs, it has become an important competency just like any other skill or competency that you have in your roles at Macquarie University that you need to be really good at for your job. And wellbeing is now one of them. So what happens to us as we're progressing through change and we're thrust out into that transition state? And what I said before around we like our current state. It might not be perfect, and usually it's not, but we really like it because our current state gives us four things. First, it gives us a huge boost in perceptions of control. We feel in control. I might have my little routine, I know where I'm sitting, I know where I'm going, I know what my job is, so I feel in control. I feel pretty good. When we feel in control as humans, that actually is a huge boost to our psychological well-being. I have a nice comfort zone around me. I know, where everything is, I know what's required of me, I know who I'm working with. That comfort zone makes us feel very comfortable. And as humans, we love feeling comfortable. We don't like feeling anxious or tense or worried or whatever. So we like that state. The next one is competence. We actually feel pretty good at what we do. Because I feel pretty good about what I do, I know what I'm doing, I might have done this job for 5 years or 10 years, I know I'm pretty good at it, I actually feel quite confident. So that makes me feel really good about myself. So these are the four psychological states that are enhanced when we're in our current state. So what happens during change, when we've given a big push out into our transition zone, if we're not careful, those 4 C's can very quickly drop off. We can have a reduction in those 4 C's. I suddenly don't feel in control. I'm suddenly very quickly told to work from home, transition my personal life, my work life, all from home. So I don't feel as in control. I'm way out of my comfort zone. Suddenly I might have to learn new skills that I haven't learnt before. I might have to brush up on some technology. And in COVID-19, I think we've all learnt a lot of skills and technology-related skills to be able to operate. I've had people say to me, I've been doing the same job for 10 years, but I now don't feel very good at it. I'm not feeling competent. And because I'm not feeling competent, I'm actually losing a lot of confidence. So I'm not feeling great about myself. So you can imagine if we get a drop-off in those 4 C's, which is extremely common when we're thrust into the transition phase, we actually can we've got to be very careful, but we can go down the fast track of fear, anxiety, stress, and tension. So this program today that I'm going to be taking you through is around how do we come through phases of transition. And we will be going through phases of transition pretty much our whole lives in a variety of different contexts. But how do we actually come through those phases with our well-being intact? How do we boost some of these elements here so we can avoid going down that fast track? Because that's when it doesn't feel so good for our well-being. So what I'm going to talk you through in today's session is a model of mental fitness. So you've probably all heard of the term resilience before. Maybe just take a moment to reflect on what resilience actually means to you. You've probably heard a whole variety of different definitions of the term resilience. It's been, you only have to switch on the TV or the radio these days to hear something about resilience or well-being. Very commonly, it is defined as the ability to rise to the challenge as a challenge comes our way. It might be around how do I bounce back? How do I actually have a hit or have some challenge come my way and be able to have it not completely flatten me for days, but be able to bounce back and be able to recover from that. You may have heard it be around how do I actually be in a challenging situation but have emotional stability? How do I actually come through a challenging time with my well-being intact? And it might be just around how do I just come through challenging times without it being flattening for me, but how do I learn and grow from it, I think is a big thing about resilience. So what I like about this model, it's called a mental fitness model. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of research behind it, a lot of evidence. So I'm going to be sharing some of that with you today. But it goes through the 4 competencies related to resilience. So we all know what resilience is, but not many of us know, well, what are the competencies that underpin resilience? So one of the first ones, you'll be familiar with this after what I've just said, is about boosting perceptions of personal control. And this is one of my favourite ones because often during times of transition, and probably right now, a lot of you might feel as if I'm feeling out of control. And that was a very common response to COVID-19. Or if you're going through an organisational change, a lot of people say to me, I feel all this uncertainty around me. It doesn't feel good. I feel as if I'm out of control. So how do we boost those perceptions of personal control? If we can enhance our perceptions of personal control, we can get much better at actually boosting that, and we'll feel a whole lot better in our well-being. The second one that I'm going to take you through today is around our mindset, is around challenge. When challenging events come our way, does our mindset matter? Does it matter how I'm thinking about that event to myself? Does it matter how I'm explaining that event to myself? What is my explanatory style? Is it important for me to look at things as a challenge more than a threat? So it's around our mindset and what does that mean to me? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that one. There's some really interesting research related to challenge I'll share with you. Confidence. How can I come through challenging times, stressful times, demanding times with my confidence in check? What are some ways that I can actually have resilient thinking? What are some ways that I can actually boost my confidence along the way without having negative experiences stick to me like Teflon and follow me throughout a day, and then I'm feeling depleted and de-energized by the end of the day? And then finally, what am I going to commit to putting into action? So I think this is a really interesting one, is about people who actually are resilient, are actually good at shifting information from the knowing. I think sometimes in a lot of programs we might think, oh, I know this, or I've heard about this before, or I've learned something new, that was really interesting. I know that would be good for me, that should be good for me if only I had a bit more time. So for the whole gains of resilience in this topic of resilience and well-being, it absolutely is so dependent on you all having the ability to shift just 1 or 2 things from the knowing department. I know that'd be good for me. I know I learned something new. That's something I hadn't thought of before, into the doing component. And if you're able to make that transition into one competency that we're going to talk about today, from knowing into doing, that means you're actually transitioning it into behaviour. That is where you get the gains for your resilience and well-being. If this information just remains in the knowing department, we absolutely get no benefit out of it with this topic. It is very dependent on you being able to transition something from the knowing into the doing. And then when we eventually get good at doing things regularly enough, it becomes a habit. And we enter into that third stage, which is being. I just get up in the morning and I clean my teeth and I don't even think about it. That's a habit. And that's what well-being can get to. So I'm just going to throw it out there at the start of the session today. I wonder what it is that you will choose to take away with you. I wonder what it is that you would choose to shift from that knowing into doing. So I'm going to kick off the session today. We're just putting that out there, and as we go through the session, maybe just find 1 or 2 things that really resonate with you, and you think, actually, that's my one thing. That's my one thing that I'm going to put into practice today. And then I'm going to ask you at the end of the session, that's how we're going to close off, what is your one thing that you are prepared to shift from knowing into doing? Okay, so let's kick off with the first module. The first competency of resilience is around control. So let's take a look at that. So as we go through, I'm just going to introduce you firstly, and this is one of my favourite concepts, is around circle of influence and circle of concern. Some of you may have seen this before. It's a kind of a fairly well-known model. I really like it because it's a very practical model. So basically, the whole theory is, and I'm going to actually just draw this up on the whiteboard for you so you can see how we might actually work through an exercise related to this is that pretty much in life, there are only two circles really in our lives. There's one that's quite big and we call that the circle of concern. So I'm going to draw that up here now, that circle of concern. So this is quite big in our lives. And these are the things that concern us, they worry us, and let's face it, sometimes they keep us awake at night. In our lives we have another circle, and this circle is a lot smaller, but its impact is very significant, but it's a lot smaller, and this is called our circle of influence. So pretty much we've got these two circles here. So I wonder now, as we're going through COVID-19, and there might be other challenges and things that might be going through, obviously COVID-19, but maybe we're going through organisational change at the same time, or our personal life doesn't stop as well. So we might be going through personal changes or challenges as well. I wonder what the things are that actually are on your circle of concern. All the big things, they're often on our mind. So I'm going to just have a think about what are the common ones that often when I'm running these sessions, groups always say to me. So right now, I think a huge concern is health. It's something that I'm hearing all around the place is health, but particularly during COVID-19. How is my health? How am I looking after myself? Am I going to be vulnerable to contracting this virus and worrying about the virus, and will I get unwell? So that's a huge one. I would say another one is about the economic, big picture in terms of the economic instability in the world right now. So I'm going to put the big kind of economic picture down. That's a huge one. And I might say, I know a lot of organisations are actually going through a lot of change. So I'm going to put down organisational change as well. And you can change these to be, more relevant to yourself. I'm just showing you this as kind of a concept as to actually how this technique actually works. So as we can see, our circle of concern can be quite big. So if we start off with the first one around health, do I have any control over whether I'm going to become unwell? Do I have any control whether I will actually catch this virus and end up with COVID-19 myself? So you might think, well, actually, I do have some control. We know, for example, that this virus is quite weak when it's outside of the body, so it cannot travel. We know now it cannot travel more than 1 metre. So if I'm standing 1.5 metres or 2 metres away from someone, I'm going to be quite safe. So I've got some control over my social distancing. So I'm going to put that down. I might just use a different colour. So I've got some control over social distancing. I also might have some control over my hand hygiene, if we're my hand hygiene, because we know, again, the virus cannot survive if I'm washing my hands or sanitising my hands regularly. I might have some control over how I'm socially isolating and how many people I'm actually coming into contact with. So I'll put down social isolation. I might have some control over how I'm actually just looking after myself right now in terms of my own immunity. How am I eating? How am I sleeping? How am I exercising? All of those things that can actually boost our immunity. So I'm just going to put down our health behaviours. Do I have any control over whether I'm going to contract the virus in the long term? Over the coming weeks, over the coming months, maybe even next year, am I going to have any control over that? Perhaps not. So a little bit still has to remain out there on that circle of concern. There's a whole lot of things I can focus on, but ultimately in the big picture, I might come into contact with someone who's asymptomatic, and I might not be able to prevent that concern from going away. Do I have any control right now over the big picture in terms of the global economy that everybody is very concerned about right now? Well, what can I do about the global economy? What can I do that might impact my own financial health? So right now I could be looking at, how am I budgeting? How am I choosing to spend my money? What am I choosing to spend it on? I've just put it in the wrong category. I might look at how am I saving? I might look at how I am investing. And to some degree, I might even be able to look at how much I'm actually earning. You know, how am I actually earning? What's my earning potential? Can I increase my earning potential? Can I get some new skills or some bit more education or whatever it is that actually might increase earning capacity? Maybe not now, but maybe, later on. So I might not have that much that much control over the big picture, global economy, but there's some things I can do here. Maybe I can seek any financial advice right now if I'm really concerned. There's a lot of government support right now for businesses and individuals right now. Maybe I might look at what's available as government assistance as well. If there's someone in my family who might be impacted, so kind of having a look at that, what support's around right now. But some of that concern has to remain out there on the circle of concern. Some of that big picture economic stability. What about change? Do I have any control over whether the global economy is going to impact on whether my role might change, my job might change, or whether I'm going to have a job? So these are real concerns for people right now that I'm hearing around the place. Maybe I don't have any control over the big kind of result of change and how that might impact on the university, on my job, on the nature of the work that I'm doing. But what do I have control over? So I've got control right now maybe over how well I'm doing my job. So how well? I've got control over my performance and the quality of my work. I might have control over some skills as well. Can I put my hand up for other skills? What are the opportunities that might be coming out there? While there's some threats towards us right now, what are the opportunities that might exist right now? Are there any things, tasks, activities, things that I can put my hand up for right now that actually might help me grow out of this as well? So are there any kind of other opportunities for me to look at? So there's a whole lot, so I don't really have control over that big picture, but I've got control over how well I'm doing the day to day. And there's probably some other things that you may have thought about as we're going through this as well. So essentially, I wonder if you can see what we've been doing here. We're shifting things. Essentially, we're shifting things from the circle of concern over to the circle of influence. So when we're living in our circle of concern, it's a very reactive way to live. Our well-being is up and down and up and down and up and down, and it's very dependent on what's actually happening in the external world. By shifting our well-being and our energy, and particularly now as we're in phase 2, we don't have a lot of energy right now, so we need to conserve our energy and be very mindful about how we're spending our energy. Shifting our energy from circle of concern down to circle of influence is a very proactive way to live. So we're shifting our well-being from being very reactive out here on the circle of concern to being very proactive in here in the circle of influence. And if we can shift ourselves that way, we will start to feel a whole lot better. Because essentially, when we're living on the circle of concern, and I don't know if any of you have had a time in your life where you have spent some time living on the circle of concern. It might have been a few hours, it might have been a few days, it might have even been a few weeks or a few months. You know when you're living on the circle of concern because it starts to feel like you are banging your head against a brick wall. And you end up with a mindset that my effort does not make a difference, so why should I bother? And that is a very unhelpful mindset to have. It usually makes us feel pretty low and pretty depressed. So what I like about this is it's about taking a bit of a gear shift change and shifting our emotional energy from the circle of concern, which is very draining, very fatiguing, extremely stressful when we're living on the circle of concern. Ultimately, we're focused on all the things that we're worried about, all the things that consume us, all the things that keep us awake at night, but ultimately, we might not have any control over. Whereas what this technique is doing is being able to shift these things into things we do have control over. And that feels a whole lot better. Not only does it start to feel a whole lot better, but actually the research has shown when we start to focus on that circle of influence, not only does our well-being get boosted and we feel psychologically so much better, but our circle of influence actually expands. So it starts to grow and it starts to actually get bigger. So we start to have a different mindset of my effort does make a difference. And that is what we call self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a very big predictor of resilience. Self-efficacy refers to the belief in myself that I can handle it. I'm going to come back to self-efficacy today because we're going to talk quite a bit about that because it's such a mindset. It's one big thing that underpins a resilient mindset is the self-efficacy belief. So I also think, I remember a time when we actually were studying at university, this was many years ago when I was at university, and we actually watched an experiment with some rats. We didn't do the experiment, but we watched it. And essentially in this experiment, they actually managed to replicate the circle of influence and circle of concern. And they had in the experiment a very complicated maze. They had a rat at the start line, at the finish, they'd put some food. So on the very first day, they set up the rat in the maze. He ran the complicated maze, took a while because he'd never done it before, took a while. He got to the end, he ate the food, was reinforced by the food. The next day, he went very quickly, much quicker this time, very quickly along the maze, got reinforced by the food. The third day, he got there very, very fast, record day, did it in speed time, it was amazing, got there very, very quickly. And on the fourth day, the experimenter put a perspex screen in front of the food. So that meant the rat bumped his nose when he went to get the food. So on the fourth day, he ran that maze really, really quickly and couldn't get the food. He bumped his nose and the food was not accessible. And on the fifth day, what do you think that little rat did? He actually did not move from the start line. Somewhere in his little brain, he had learned my effort no longer makes a difference, so why bother? So he was stuck in learned helplessness, and that's a very well-known mindset, something that's been studied by psychologists for years, is our learned helplessness mindset. And that's essentially what it is in that circle of concern. So it's about shifting our influence over to something, and it might be smaller, but what do you think we always have some control over? No matter what is going on in our lives, what do we always have some control and influence over? And you might like to think about that for a moment around whenever anything is going on in our lives, what do we always have control over? And to illustrate this point, I'd like to share with you a story. And you might have even read this book. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl had a very impactful story where he grew up in World War II and he was in a concentration camp. I'm pretty sure it might have been Auschwitz that he was living in for many years. And he's got this very famous quote, and you can imagine under those traumatic conditions, the circle of concern is very big. It's massive, and your circle of influence in that type of situation is absolutely tiny. And he's got this very famous quote around, you can take away my security, you can take away my safety, you can take away my hygiene, you can take away my food, you can take away my friends, you can take away my family, you can basically take anything away from me, but the one thing that you cannot take away from me is my ability to choose my reaction and my response to this event. The meaning that I'm going to take from this event every single day. And every single day in that concentration camp, and he was there for quite a long time, he focused on what do I have some control over, and ultimately it was his mind. It was his mindset. No one can take away from me how I'm going to choose to react and respond and how I'm going to make meaning of this event. And anyway, Viktor Frankl survived this experience in the concentration camp, and he ended up becoming a world famous psychiatrist and helped people make meaning out of difficult or traumatic events. So if we think if Viktor Frankl can do it in those types of situations, then hopefully we can take a little bit of that learning. We always have some control over how we choose to react and to respond to these events. I'm going to come back to that when we're talking about challenge and confidence as well. So, and we can see, lots of different types of examples on this. I don't know if any of you have ever read, Ian McKernan did the, Clean Up Australia Day. I don't know if anyone has ever read his autobiography. There's a lot of concern that people have over the environment. That's another concern that people often say, I'm very concerned about where the environment is going to end up. And he had the same concern, only he had it many years before anybody else could see this was going to become a problem. And he, instead of banging his head against a brick wall, he started to look at what can I do in my little circle of influence. So he started off very small. He started off with what can I do in my own little patch. So we started looking at how can I use with my family, what difference can we make with the environment, with some practices we might have around the household, with respect to my family, how can we get into better habits about the environment with our immediate family. So we did that for a while. And then suddenly he started to talk to people, with friends and family. And suddenly that spread. And then suddenly it became communities. And then suddenly it became Australia. And now Clean Up Australia Day is an international day. But it didn't happen from him banging his head against a brick wall, because he would have got that learned helplessness. My effort doesn't make a difference, so why do I bother? It happened because he focused his energy on the tiny little circle of influence. And because he focused his energy there, it expanded. And I think that that's a wonderful story, just to really be able to remember that when we focus on the right things, it actually does expand and we get bigger and we feel a lot better as well. So just going back to the slides, just around, I'd like to get you to be able to practice that exercise now. So I was going to get you just to reflect on these things. What are some of those specific scenarios that you might feel right now that you don't feel as if you've got much control over? So what would be on your circle of concern, in other words? Right now, what is in your circle of concern? And what does this impact have on you when you're starting to live in your circle of concern, start to get banging your head against a brick wall, and maybe even drawing those circles up? I always think when you get good at using this technique, you can do this in your head, but initially, I think it's really good to be able to write it down, get all this, what are the things that concern me, what are the things that I can maybe shift into my circle of influence, and draw it all up. And to look at how can you use the circles right now to be able to better manage some of those challenges that are you're facing right now. So maybe just take a moment just to pause the video now and to complete that little exercise. Okay, so in terms of just going on to the next thing, around looking at our performance zone, that's another part of being able to have good control, is around our performance zone. So I'm going to just draw this up on the whiteboard for you for a moment, is to be able to, this is the next competency for control, is how do we control our zones, our performance zones? And you're all in at Macquarie University, high performing, high achieving environment there. So this is our performance zone. This is our, what we call our overstimulation zone, and this is our kind of understimulation zone. So, and this is our kind of stress levels. So we know that when we're in our particular performance zone, our stress will enhance us. It lifts us up and actually can enhance our performance. Whereas when we go too far over, suddenly my stress shifts from helpful into harmful. That's not so great. And suddenly our performance drops off. And this is our understimulation. So those people that are not feeling challenged or don't have enough work to do, or I'm really don't have the, enough to stimulate me or enough stress, can feel just as distressed at those people at the other end that might be working 24/7. So this is a really interesting concept, just kind of that little kind of diagram there. And I'm going to use the analogy of athletes. Athletes are incredibly good at doing a couple of things. So, and I liken you all in a high-performing, high-achieving environment like you are at the university. I do liken you all a little bit like elite athletes, maybe not as much from the physical fitness perspective, no offence, but certainly from a mental fitness perspective. You need to be as good or better than an athlete with your mental fitness. So, an athlete is incredibly good at doing two things. So firstly, an athlete does not take their psychological well-being for granted. They do not go into a high-performance event and just take their psychological well-being for granted. They do a lot of things during their high-performing event to keep themselves mentally fit, to keep their stress at a very good level where it will accelerate their performance. So that's one thing. The second thing an athlete is very, very good at doing is that they are very good at knowing what to do in their recovery. An athlete will spend hours in recovery. They might have their ice baths, they might watch a video replay of their performance situation and learn and grow from it. They might have a massage, they might prioritize their sleep, they might talk to somebody, a coach or mentor, they might make sure that they're staying hydrated. Whatever it is that they do, they are so good at their recovery that they get up again the next day and they enter into their performance zone pretty much straight away. So they are two things that an athlete is very, very good at doing. So in our modern kind of workplaces, we also need to be as good at those two things. We cannot, as I said before, take our psychological well-being, particularly in a high-performing environment. We need to be actually doing things actively to keep our stress at a level that's going to accelerate and lift our performance. We also need to be very good, especially now during COVID-19, around how do I actually switch off from work? What are the things I'm doing to end the day? What are the things I'm doing for my recovery right now to be able to keep myself in a very, very good level? So that I can enter the day again, the next day, into my zone the next day, and be pretty much in my performance zone. So there's some really interesting research, and I'm going to talk to you in a moment about the science of the 8 top wellbeing strategies. But right now there's some really interesting research around, from a workplace perspective, how long really can we remain in our performance zone? How long can we really remain without, and in your roles, it's your prefrontal cortex needs to be in very good shape. How long can our prefrontal cortex maintain concentration, memory, decision making, ability to read information and be able to churn through lots of reading and to be able to meet a deadline and come up with a high quality deadline or product? How long can we really remain in our performance zone before our prefrontal cortex gets a little bit fatigued and tired? And the research shows, you might even just wanted to have a minute to think about that. Realistically, I know we're all individually very different, but generally, how long do you think you've got before your memory and concentration are significantly reduced? The research on this shows it's about 90 minutes, just roughly about 90 minutes. You can sprint your performance zone, you can read, you can remember, you can focus, you can concentrate, but after about 90 minutes, you might notice your concentration wanders. You might notice it's a bit harder to focus. You might notice that your thinking is getting a little bit slower. So it generally is around 90 minutes. So what's actually happening to us from a neurochemistry perspective is around the 90-minute mark, in order for your prefrontal cortex to be in very good shape, you need 2 very important neurotransmitters to remain nice and full in your prefrontal cortex. And they are predominantly, the 2 are dopamine and serotonin. So they tend to run out after about 90 minutes, especially if you're working hard and you're working fast, like most of us do these days. And if you're worried as well, if you're stressed, if we're in phase 1 of the well-being that we spoke about before, you can be using up a lot of dopamine and a lot of serotonin, which means your brain is not going to be switched on as much. You're not going to be engaged. Now, the interesting thing around this is that we need to basically get very good at topping up our serotonin and topping up our dopamine at the end of the 90 minutes. And they can be some very quick things. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. It doesn't have to be something that's 2 hours long. You can get a quick hit of dopamine or serotonin just by doing something in a minute, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. It doesn't take that long, but the point is we need to do it after 90 minutes. The interesting thing about the role of dopamine and serotonin is that in order for us to engage in a positive well-being habit, we need dopamine and serotonin to be extremely high. So you might notice yourself that you might set a great well-being intention at the start of the day because you've had a good sleep and your dopamine's all topped up through sleep, and you set a goal, and the goal might be, I am going to finish work at a reasonable time today. I am not going to have any alcohol. I am going to have the steamed fish and the steamed veggies for dinner, and I'm going to go for a run after work. So that's a pretty good well-being goal that you set at the start of the day. And what happens is you have a really, really busy day and you have forgotten to top up your dopamine and your serotonin every 90 minutes. So what happens is you're finishing the day and you are running on empty. You have no neurotransmitters left. So in order for you to engage in those positive well-being habits, it's almost impossible for you to do so with your dopamine very low and your serotonin very low. Because any good well-being habit needs dopamine and serotonin to be very high. So what happens is you end the day and you come home from work, well now we're all at home anyway, and you want to relax. Oh, I'm not going to go for that run, I don't have any energy, I'm too tired, I've churned through my dopamine. And so the first thing you do is you sit down on the couch. That's always risky. And then the second thing you do is you open that bottle of wine. The third thing you do is you put on the TV. Oh, Married at First Sight is on, or something like that. I've never watched it, but I heard a lot of people are addicted to it. Probably releases a bit of dopamine. And suddenly, before you know it, you've ordered in pizza. You're binge watching really bad TV, and you've not only had that glass of wine, but you've actually had the whole bottle. So that's what happens when we're dopamine depleted. And that's so we're not going to engage in going to the gym, in going for that walk around the block, whatever, unless our dopamine and our serotonin is very high. So we've got to be effortful at topping ourselves up. So I was just going to get you to pause the video now, and I'd like you just to think about two things. One, what is a couple of things that work for you right now? At the end of the 90 minutes, now you know that that's a bit of a cut-off, at the end of the 90 minutes, what do you do to top yourselves up with your serotonin and your dopamine? What do you know gives you an energy boost? And the second thing I'm going to get you to think about is right now, even during COVID-19, it's very hard for people to actually switch off. What are you doing to enter into your recovery zone? What are you doing to transition into that recovery? So maybe just those two questions. Maybe pause the video right now and just have a think about what your answer is to those two questions, and then we're going to come back and I'll share the science behind the top 8 wellbeing strategies with you. So thank you for doing that little exercise, and you've probably touched on some of the things that I'm going to go through with you now, but hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit of the research and the science and a bit of the evidence behind why some of these strategies are really important. So the first one is around, you might have actually said in your answers, oh, I might go and have a chat to somebody. And right now during COVID-19, this one is a lot more effortful and a lot more intentional because we are now working remotely. So we need to be a little bit more conscious of it. But the whole science behind connectedness is very, very important because when we're stressed, we get a build-up of oxytocin in our body. Oxytocin makes us want to talk to someone, vent to someone, debrief with someone, have a chat to someone, send someone a little SMS, whatever it is. Oxytocin makes us want to connect. And when we connect with someone, and it must be like a meaningful connection, doesn't have to be long, it can be 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, doesn't have to be long. If we have a moment of meaningful connectedness, we release the oxytocin in our brain. And the oxytocin makes us feel so much better. I don't know if any of you have ever had a time in your life where you've gone through a challenge, a hurdle, or an obstacle, something difficult, and you've talked to someone about it. That person can't change that situation that you're facing, but you suddenly have a chat to them, debrief with someone, suddenly you feel so much better, and that's what oxytocin does. It actually releases in your brain and it gives you sometimes a change in perspective, because it floods your brain and you're actually looking at the challenging situation with a fresh perspective because you've actually had a chemical shift in your brain. And what oxytocin does, it actually can boost your beliefs of self-efficacy. Ah, right, I can handle this now. Actually, now I'm talking about it, it doesn't seem as big. It doesn't seem as insurmountable, or a sense that we're getting right now that we're all in this together. We're all kind of in this challenging situation together right now, is that sense of commonality, and I think that that's really helping people through this time. And it might be, oh, I didn't know you've had this experience before as well. Now I feel so much better. So that's what oxytocin does. So it's really important for us. That's what connection is. But the challenge is that when we're not tracking so well and we're feeling depleted in our well-being, we're not feeling so great, we'll actually do the opposite of connection. We'll disconnect, we'll pull away, we'll keep to ourselves. And that means that oxytocin does not get released. It gets stored in our body instead. And it plays out in terms of negative stress and tension and low mood. So one of the best things that we can do is actually reach out and connect. So we are associated with Are You OK Day, so I'm sure you've all heard of Are You OK Day. And I sit on their conversation think tank, and I have done for 10 years or so, and we help to write a lot of the content and the ideas and material for Are You OK Day. And a few years ago, we did a study with Are You OK Day, and we looked at if connectedness is such a big part of keeping people psychologically well, how connected are we really? And we participated in some research, and we studied how connected are people, and the results were pretty compelling. That we found about 85% of people surveyed were spending 45 hours of their downtime per week connected with screens and devices, as opposed to 6 to 8 hours per week connected with friends and family and the people that they care about. So I thought that was quite interesting, that we are choosing in our downtime to not connect with people, which is one of the biggest things to keep our well-being in check. We're choosing to spend it with screens and devices, so we're not going to be releasing oxytocin. And I know now, during this time of COVID-19, connectedness is a little more challenging. So we do have to be more effortful and more intentional and more conscious about it, particularly because we are still working remotely, and by the time you might be watching this video, you're actually maybe working back in the office again with some colleagues around you, but we've still got to remain socially distant. So, and I know people are actually having some really creative times right now around coming together on Zoom meetings and having a theme to the Zoom meeting, whatever it might be, but it's around we can still release oxytocin. But particularly we get more of a release if we can see people. So I think visually being able to see people right now, like once a day, someone somewhere in your team needs to be visually seeing someone to see how are they presenting. Are they okay? What do they look like? Are they looking okay? And because sometimes if people are not tracking so well, you'll be able to pick that up, quite early from just looking at someone. So right now it is just about being more effortful and intentional and conscious about it, particularly because I'm aware that a lot of people are self-isolating alone. So that connectedness is very, very important. So reaching out to people and being proactive is one big thing. Exercise. Some of you may have jotted down this, that it might be a strategy for you. And even if it's just at the 90-minute mark, it could even be just taking, a little quick walk around the block. Now that we're working remotely, you might be more able to fit exercise in right now in our COVID-19 life than you were able to before. But whatever it is, whether it's exercise or whether it's just getting more movement out of your day, it's really important because our bodies were actually not designed to be sitting in front of a desk, and they've shown that the average person is now sitting for about 10 to 12 hours a day. So when you think of our day, 10 to 12 hours a day of sitting, plus sleep on top of that, that's a lot of our life that we have spent sedentary. And our bodies were never designed to be spending that much time sedentary. So it is, now they found actually, that being able to be, moving around is so important for us. Our sedentary lifestyles, can be very, very, very bad for our health in terms of the health consequences to do with that. So it's around finding ways to get some more movement or some more exercise out of your day. Lots of studies done to show that exercise is our body's natural antidepressant. So they have two groups of people. In lots of studies they've done this. Two groups of people with mild to moderate depression. In one group they give them treatment purely by exercise, 3 times a week for 15 minutes a day. And the other half of the group, they give them treatment purely by antidepressant medication. And 6 months later and 12 months later, they come back and they measure their wellbeing scores. And it's the exercise group that far exceeds in their wellbeing scores. So it definitely shows that our exercise or getting more movement out of your day is your body's natural antidepressant. Also, it obviously, Sometimes we can exercise with a friend, so sometimes, even though right now we've got to remain socially distant, we can get that social connectedness in again. Another study that just came out at the start of last year actually showed that exercising 3 times a week for 15 minutes reduced people's rate of a mental health issue by up to 30%. So it's a significant protective factor. So finding ways to get exercise out of your day right now is really important for us. It gives us that outlet. In terms of just being able to breathe differently, I know this sounds like a simple one, but a lot of the time we don't breathe that well. So I don't know if you have noticed a time when you've been stressed and under the pump and under a bit of pressure, how your breathing has shifted and changed. What might you notice about your breathing when you're under stress and under pressure? And it may be you've noticed your breathing becoming short and shallow and coming from your chest. And that's a very common response to the stress response. What that type of breathing does is it actually spikes the release of cortisol, which is a stress hormone that's not so great for us, particularly it's not so great for our heart. And it makes us feel more anxious and more worried and more stressed because we're breathing so short and shallowly. So many years ago, I used to work with a group of cardiologists, and I would see people who either had a significant coronary heart event, or through heart scans, they were predicted to experience a coronary heart event. And my role as a psychologist was to look at habit change and behaviour change and help these people have long, healthy heart lives. And one of the first things that I would do with these people was actually to teach them how to breathe a little differently. And I would just show them a very, very simple breathing technique. So instead of breathing short and shallowly from your chest, you're actually, and maybe you want to practice this now, where you're sitting right now is just to put your hand on your abdomen or your diaphragm, be able to put your hand there, and you should be able to feel taking a deep breath in for 3 seconds and taking a breath out for 3 seconds, but you should be able to feel your breath coming from your diaphragm or your abdomen rather than from your chest. Your chest will certainly go up and down, it will move, but your breath is not coming from your chest area. And that deep breathing, if you just practice that rhythm now, just breathing in, and I'm going to get you to breathe in through your nose for 3 seconds, and breathing out through your nose for out through your mouth for 3 seconds. And as you're breathing in, maybe you just want to say the word one to yourself. And as you're breathing out, say the word relax to yourself. And as you breathe out, on every out breath, you just let a little bit more of that tension and that stress go. So maybe practicing that for a moment now, just breathing in for 3 seconds. And out for 3 seconds. In through your nose. And out through your mouth. So I wonder how that felt. I wonder if you noticed, just even that was a very short exercise, how your physiology may have changed. And what we do know is your physiology affects your psychology. So if your physiology is nice and slow and you've calmed it down, your psychology will follow. The amazing thing is about this breathing technique that not a lot of people know. The coronary heart health issues can be predicted by a build-up of cortisol, the stress hormone cortisol, that over a 15 or 20-year career, if we're releasing a lot of cortisol, it can predict coronary heart health issues later on in life. But the amazing thing is that little breathing technique can remove, every single day, can remove about 70% of the cortisol that you have during the day. So that means you can have a long and healthy health life just by doing 5 minutes of breathing every single day. And no one needs to know when you're doing it. Sometimes, now I actually am in the office today, I will do this breathing technique driving home. And at the end of the day, it's my way of kind of switching off. I do it with my eyes open, of course. It doesn't matter. You still release cortisol with your eyes open or closed. So whichever one. But that's a really nice strategy. Now, one of the biggest ways of actually topping up your dopamine is actually through sleep. Now, they've done lots of studies on sleep, and I love these studies because they allow people to sleep for certain durations of time, and then they shake them awake at various intervals, and then if that's not bad enough, they get them to perform maths tests, problem-solving tests, IQ tests, and they see which group performs best. So maybe just take a moment to think about how much sleep do you think you need to be able to remain in that peak performance zone, to be operating at your best with your prefrontal cortex nice and topped up, sprinting away. How much sleep do you really need? The research shows us it's around 7 to 8 hours of sleep, that we perform best on those cognitive ability tests when we are getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. The group that regularly sleeps about 10, 11, 12 hours without a medical condition, they don't live as long, so that was not so great. The group that were getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night performed at, actually 3 to 5 hours of sleep, performed at the same level as the group that had a blood alcohol reading of 0.05. So that means that they were legally drunk. But it's interesting in that a lot of Australians, most Australians, get on average around 5 or 6 hours of disturbed sleep a night. So that means one of the biggest ways we actually top up our dopamine every single night is through sleep. And so we can actually sleep a full 8 hours, but if we're not progressing through the right stages of the sleep cycle, then we can wake up feeling absolutely exhausted. I don't know if any of you have ever had that experience where you can sleep a full 7 or 8 hours and you wake up and you feel absolutely tired and exhausted and shattered. It's often because you've skipped through the stages of the sleep cycle that are required, that are really important for us to get the dopamine hit. So every night when you go to bed, you have 180 billion neurons in your prefrontal cortex. Every night, if we get good sleep, and if we progress through all the right stages of the sleep cycle, you will get a fresh 180 billion neurons replaced. So your brain just does a nice little clean and repair job every single night, but only if you progress through the right stages of the sleep cycle. And the most important stages, it is nowadays a bit more about the stages and the quality of sleep rather than the quantity of sleep. We really need to be able to progress through a combination of our deep sleep cycle and our REM sleep cycle. That's our rapid eye movement sleep cycle. That's the type of sleep we're in when we're dreaming, when we're in that deep sleep and then we might go into that dreaming sleep. That's where we get a lot of our dopamine all renewed, our brain all cleared out, and we go to work the next day with our prefrontal cortex all topped up with 180 billion neurons. If you skip over those sleep cycles, the deep sleep and the REM sleep cycle, you will wake up the next day with your old burned out 180 billion neurons from the day before. And that's why you can feel like you're not on top of your game. And you actually probably aren't, because your neurons have not been cleared out. So you're going to work the next day with all your burned out neurons in there. So the studies now show around how do we maximize our chance of actually progressing through the right sleep cycles? How do we maximize our chance of actually getting into that deep sleep and that REM sleep cycle? And I know at the moment, I'm speaking to a lot of people that as a result of COVID-19 and all the worries and the challenges, sleep is really commonly disturbed. People can say, oh, I'm waking up at 3 a.m. and I can't get back to sleep. And that early morning awakening is really, really common because a lot of our REM sleep is actually in the early hours of the morning. So you may have noticed that yourself, that you might start to go into that really deep sleep, that REM sleep where you're dreaming really heavily at around between 3 and 5 o'clock. And that's often the time that our mind is waking up, trying to be very helpful, remembering something or worrying about something for us, but it's not that helpful after a while. So the way that we can maximize our chances of going through the right sleep cycles is getting into good sleep habits. It's about these days before we go to sleep, reminding ourselves, hey, I'm starting to wind down now, start releasing some of that melatonin. And that's cueing your brain to release the melatonin so I start to feel tired. These days we have so many habits and we have so many substances that we consume all throughout the day that interfere with the sleep cycle. So our brain does not know, it's time to start releasing the melatonin now. And that will make us feel tired. So that's how jet lag works. that your brain will start to release melatonin at like maybe 11 a.m. when you're in another country. So it starts to know, I'm really tired now. So how do we actually induce this? So these days we can't really take our sleep for granted. So a couple of strategies. I mean, you'll all have different strategies about what you're doing to cue your mind that it's time to wind down. So getting off technology, and the research shows an hour to an hour and a half before you go to bed. Because of the stimulation, if you're working an hour and a half or slightly less, half an hour before you go to bed, it can get all the adrenaline and all the kind of the awake hormones going, and your prefrontal cortex is operating on all, firing on all cylinders. So an hour to an hour and a half before you go to bed, making sure you're disconnecting from technology. Some people might have like a hot cup of tea to wind themselves down. I have to have a hot shower before I go to bed. Even I've now got so into the association between a hot shower and sleep, I cannot have a shower during the day or in the morning. I am literally fatigued and tired all day if I have a shower in the middle of the day or first thing in the morning. So it's around what do you do? Sometimes it might be reading. People often have that association between reading and falling asleep. It might be doing breathing, that breathing technique, mindfulness, a bit of yoga, maybe just doing some stretching, just doing something to release the body and let the body be reminded that, okay, it's time to wind down now. Even one thing I do is I dim the lights, and now it's kind of going into winter. Dimming the lights when it starts to get dark is a big one to cue your brain, oh, it's getting dark. Melatonin starts to release now because I'm looking at the light and I can tell by the light. So whatever it is you might do, and for those of you that may be experiencing sleep disturbance at the moment, I always think it's a good idea to dump down everything, all the things that are on your mind and worrying you, all the things that are concerning you, maybe even doing a to-do list, because sometimes at 3 a.m. your prefrontal cortex is trying to be helpful. Saying, hey, you haven't worried about this very important event that you've got on tomorrow for about 7 hours. So I'm just reminding you to wake up and worry about it. Or it might be saying to you, hey, you've got a very important detail. Don't forget this thing that you've got on. So I'm going to remind you of this important detail. So sometimes taking a big mind dump before you go to bed is very useful. So your mind can actually go to sleep, just knowing that the prefrontal cortex has already taken care of it. Or if you are waking up in the middle of the night, maybe even keeping a pad or a pen right near your bed, and you can jot that worry down or that concern down or that idea down or whatever it is, so you can mind dump and your body can actually rest and go back to sleep. Even if you are waking up during the middle of the night, it's about not getting your fight or flight reactions turned on, not getting that adrenaline. So even that breathing technique is really useful to be able to do if you're having sleep disturbance, so you can actually go back to sleep. Even if you can't go back to sleep, the research shows if we can go into a deep state of relaxation, not worrying about not going to sleep. A lot of people worry about, how am I going to work in the morning when I've only had 3 hours sleep? That will wake you up, that type of worrying. But if you can just go into a deep state of relaxation and think, well, as long as I'm relaxed, it actually can equate to about 2 or 3 hours of sleep, even if you're just lying there in a very deep state of relaxation. So that can top you up as well. So another way of keeping your dopamine nice and full and nice and topped up is around getting a hit of positive emotion. Now this is a really interesting one because we are biologically pre-programmed as humans to quite like negative emotion. We love to delve into negative emotion, worry, tension, fear, anxiety, and we're biologically programmed for that. It's really bad for us though. We know negative emotion is not great for us, and there's been lots of studies done where they've induced people in states of negative emotion. And it's only been quite a short time, like maybe 30 minutes. Then they get them to perform maths tests, IQ tests, problem solving tests, cognitive tests. No surprise, when people are engaged in negative emotion, their performance on those measures drops significantly. Not only do they feel pretty bad about themselves, their well-being is depleted, but their performance is depleted as well. They get those same people and they induce them in positive states of emotion. And I wonder if you can think of now what some examples of positive emotion are. So I think it's quite interesting because whenever I ask a group this question, everyone rattles off all the different types of negative emotion, and people can only think of like 2 or 3 positive emotions. And I think that's really interesting because our brain, we can't even think of all the different positive emotions. There's like about 50 of them. And it's not just happiness. It's not just aiming for happiness. About 10 years ago, some of you may remember, there was a happiness movement just in order to keep our well-being, on track and our well-being fit and in a good shape. We just need to be happier in our life. And that actually striving for happiness actually made people more unhappy. So actually had the opposite effect. Whereas now the research has become a lot more sophisticated, it's come a long way, and it's around now getting a hit of positive emotion. And that could be achievement, motivation, satisfaction, contentment. Happiness may be one. Gratitude. Whenever I see like a sunrise or a sunset, I get that positive emotion of beauty or inspiration. Whatever it may be, I'm sure you can all think of different positive emotions that you like to get a hit of. And it can be savouring even, just being able to savour those positive emotions is really, really important, because when we are engaged with positive emotion, and the research shows it doesn't even have to be very long, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, we get a huge release of dopamine. That is how powerfully good positive emotion is for us. We get a huge release of dopamine, and that creates what we call the upward spiral. We are very good at getting ourselves into a downward spiral. We're very good, we're psychologically attracted to it, but we can actually get ourselves into a positive spiral, an upward spiral, and we can go the other way. So it all starts with being able to release a little bit of positive emotion, which floods our brain with dopamine, and then we're off and running again, and we're kind of okay. So the challenge is, when you actually are sitting there at your desk or at home right now, and you're stuck in negative emotion and your brain is literally shrunk, that's what's actually happening, our prefrontal cortex is actually shrinking. How do you remember to actually get into a state of positive emotion? How do you flip yourself from negative emotion to positive emotion when your brain and your prefrontal cortex is shrinking? The research has shown us the best way to do it is to engage with one of the 5 senses. So for hearing, for example, listening to music is a really, really important one. Music can release huge amounts of dopamine, and you might have noticed yourself, you can induce particular mood states through music. So if you have had a really busy day and you're coming home and you want to relax, you're probably going to play some quiet music at home to kind of get you that chill out lounge music to get you into that relaxed state. And it's really annoying when you're really tired and you've had a big day, someone's playing that doof doof kind of, high impact music. It's really annoying because you just say, I just want to relax. And it's hard to relax when you've got music trying to generate another state. If you were going out into a party and you're seeing some people and you want to have a bit of energy about you, you're probably going to play something high energy to put you in that state. You look at athletes, they are always walking around with their headphones on. They're often listening to music, something that they find motivating, something that's going to push them into positive emotion. So athletes perform at their best when they are in positive emotion. If they're in fear, anxiety, depression, low mood, they're not going to be performing at their best. So they do lots of things, and obviously hearing is one of them. It could be visual. When I'm traveling a lot, I look at photos on my phone. Photos are a great way to save a positive experience, and you start to look at a funny time, a happy time, a time with people that you care about, and you start to release that dopamine. They've even shown that the strongest effect is actually getting out in nature. That's the strongest release of dopamine that we can have through visual. And if you can't actually get out in nature at the moment, although we can still go walking and things like that, you may be able to. Actually, they found effects for just looking at a view of nature. And if you can't look at a view of nature, they found positive effects even looking at a screensaver of nature. So when I read this research, I seriously did go and get a screensaver of a beach in Bali or Fiji or wherever. Beautiful, like paradise beach, and you get this hit of positive emotion whenever you look at it. Look forward to that next holiday, and yeah, you're releasing that dopamine. It could be through taste, actually, and they have done some studies. For those of you who like coffee, caffeine was a big one in actually helping your prefrontal cortex. People performed better with a little bit of coffee. If you have like 10 coffees or so, your performance drops off significantly, but it was just this one coffee or caffeine, people actually did perform better in cognitive tests than those people that had absolutely no caffeine. And chocolate does boost our mood. Absolutely. So I know it depends on if you like those things, but it actually does boost your mood. And taste was very similar for those as well. Smell, it could be, scents, like even perfume reminds you of certain things or puts you in a mood state. It can be even, candles or incense or whatever it might be. And even, I think, touch, that can be, they found so much research to look at. We release a huge amount of serotonin with pets. Patting a pet, we release a huge amount of serotonin. Not only does the pet enjoy it, but we get a huge boost to our well-being. Even getting a massage, we release huge amounts of serotonin. And I think that this is an interesting one. I don't know about you, but when I am trying to enter into my recovery at the end of the day, I have to get changed. I have to get out of my work clothes and into something else. It's almost like a significance of changing hats. So sometimes the clothes that you wear induce a mood state. When I was a lot younger and I was starting out in my career, I'd have this red power suit and I'd wear this suit to instill confidence in myself. And I remember putting on this suit, I've got to do this big presentation today, and it would make me feel so much more confident and in control. Those two C's again. So whatever it might be that you do, whether it's changing clothes can induce mood state, it absolutely, those sorts of things are very, very important. So whatever you choose, it's around having the awareness, and it's kind of hard when your prefrontal cortex is shrinking to even know you're in negative emotion. And negative emotion is so bad for our well-being, even though we're psychologically attracted to it. It's so depleting for our well-being. For every one negative emotion we have, we need to top it up by 3 positive emotions to give us our well-being in balance. But it doesn't need to be for long. Remember, we can get a huge dopamine release by 1 minute of looking at photos, of 5 minutes of listening to music, of half an hour walk in nature, whatever it might be. They don't need to be long things. But that's a really important one, to be able to give us that hit of positive emotion. Now, controlling your devices. Now, this is a really interesting one I'm finding right now during COVID-19, when people are actually more, because we're working from home, people are more connected to their devices than they would otherwise normally be. So now this is quite interesting that they've done a lot of research on our recovery time. From 2007, when the smartphone first came out, to 2017. And the results are not so great. So it's going to be worse actually in 2020, I would say. So by the time in 2007, they measured our recovery times, just kind of on the average person. So by the time we work a certain amount of hours in a 24-hour day, by the time we sleep a certain amount of hours in a 24-hour day, by the time we engage in survival activities like eating and drinking, looking after other people, our recovery zone in 2007 did look quite healthy. It was like this. It was like a sliver, kind of like, well, like a, quite a good chunk of our life was devoted to recovery. And when they took us another measure of our recovery zone in 2017, the results were pretty compelling. That they found that it reduced significantly, our recovery zones have reduced significantly from looking like a healthy level like this into being a tiny little slither. You could barely see it. And I think that this is important to reflect on, because our recovery time is often, our downtime. It's the time that we engage in other purposeful and meaningful activities outside of work. It's a time where we might have other purposeful and meaningful relationships outside of work. It is a time when we might just chill out and give to ourselves. It's a time where we might invest in other things. Whatever it is, it's actually often a time that we tend to reflect on towards the end of our life. Yet from 2007, when it looked pretty healthy, to 2017, if we're not careful, we're going to lose that recovery time. And we are working harder and faster these days, and it is not sustainable to be expecting ourselves to be on 24/7. And during COVID-19, this is a time where I'm really seeing right now, people are saying to me, it's hard for me to switch off. I am working all the way through, and I am not being cued. So in other words, our stopping cues are not there to actually stop. So if I'm in a normal office environment, I can see, oh, it's getting a bit dark now. Oh, I can see people standing up and they're moving around. Oh, it must be the end of the day. It's time to go. I've got to catch that bus. I've got to catch that train. You are being cued. Even to remember to eat. Oh, I'm seeing other people moving around. Oh, I'm feeling a bit hungry. That's right. It's lunchtime. And I have been guilty of this during COVID-19 because I've had no stopping cues. And sometimes I've gone and had lunch at 3 o'clock because I've just forgotten. There's been no stopping cues around me to remind me to stop. And this is what we have to do to even just reverse the trend more normally as we return to our new normal. We've got to get good at putting those stopping cues back in so we can actually carve out a little bit more time, recovery time for ourselves these days. And remember, athletes are so good at that recovery. They realise it's important, they factor it in, they prioritise it. And I think this is the thing about how do we prioritise our recovery at the end of the day. What are some things we might put up? What are some boundaries? What are some stopping cues we might put up? Because I don't know, I mean, some of you are maybe around my age where maybe you can remember a time where stopping cues were literally built into every single thing we did. We would go to work, we didn't have technology, we didn't have a laptop, we didn't have a phone, we didn't have technology to keep us connected. So we would stop, we'd finish work at the end of the day and we might exercise, we might speak to a friend or a family member. We might even have an interest or a hobby. We might do something with that time that we actually had because we stopped. You might remember you watched your favourite TV show and you had to wait an entire week for the next episode. So we couldn't binge watch our favourite TV shows in one night if we really wanted to. You might remember you would read a book and you'd finish the book or you'd finish a newspaper and you would finish it and you'd put it away and you'd move on to something else. You'd stop your activity and you'd go on to something else. So what happened very quickly with technology was that all stopping cues were pretty much removed. So we are the first really generation that needs to know how to put stopping cues back in because we've tried to live without them and we haven't done so well because our recovery time is a tiny little sliver. So these days we're coming around to this mindset now around we're only able to perform at our best if we're allowing our recovery time as well. You would not expect an athlete to be able to sprint that marathon. They pace themselves on that marathon and you can be guaranteed that at the end of that marathon, they are then in their recovery zone for a little bit of time. So it's actually even worthwhile just starting to think like that. Performance zone, recovery zone. That's how I think about my day these days. And when you are in recovery, you have to act and think and behave like you're in the recovery zone. So as an example of this was a couple of months ago, I decided to walk home. Great, I'm starting my recovery, done a full day's work, I was looking forward to walking home. On the way home, I started to take all these calls, like all these client calls and people wanting little things and what have you. And I thought, hang on, I haven't even started my recovery and I'm almost home. I've got like an hour walk and I'm almost home and I haven't had any recovery. So that's an example of about when you're in your recovery zone, you've got to act and think like you're in recovery. If you go downstairs for a 5-minute little recovery zone, you need to be, if you're on your mobile and you're checking things and you're doing your emails whilst you're in the coffee queue, you've just eroded that recovery zone. So it's around, being consistent with that so you can give to yourself. Even the recent research is showing now that we're operating so hard and so fast these days that actually, aside from sleep, we need a 20-minute restorative break at some point throughout the day. Doesn't all need to be in one go, but at some point we need snippets of 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. We need a restorative break of 20 minutes where we're not thinking about not doing anything. And the reason for that is really important. It's around, before I actually move on, it's around just thinking now in COVID-19, how are you stopping your day? What are those cues that you have to actually stop? Because a lot of people are saying to me, I'm just working through because I've lost my stopping cues. Maybe I had one client that set an alarm to remind her to log off. I had another client that said, right, because now we don't have as much of the transition from, we would normally have transition, like maybe getting in a car or public transport to use that transition time from work to home as part of our recovery. Now people are saying there's no gap. I'm literally going from work into personal life. So you might want to build in a walk around the block, take the dog for a walk or whatever it might be. You might just want to, the other day I just put my laptop down, I turned off all the computers and I just sat at my desk for 5 minutes and just did some breathing before I walked into my other life. So it's around, what are you doing right now to intentionally put some stopping cues in your day? Because it's really tiring being on Zoom meetings, technology meetings, or using technology back to back to back to back. It's much more tiring, it's much more fatiguing. We're trying to read body language, we're trying to do a whole lot more in our mind. So it's around just thinking around, what are you doing right now to be able to stop? And how can you build in a little pause before you actually go from work into your personal life, and now we're not having the commuting time, what are you going to put in place right now to be able to give yourself a bit of a gap that can already start that recovery? It can be simple things, they don't even need to be very long. And the reason is because we have been slightly damaging our prefrontal cortex by working at the rate that we work at these days. So they have done some pretty amazing studies where they've taken brain scans, MRI scans of people's brain. And they have measured people who've been in pretty, high-performing, high-achieving jobs, a lot of reading, a lot of memory, a lot of, processing information, like most of us these days, no surprise. And they have done MRI scans in their brain to say after about 15 years of our prefrontal cortex operating hard and fast, no surprise, there's damage that shows up on the prefrontal cortex, and it plays out really slightly, and we kind of just get used to it and think it's normal. So it could be, oh, I saw a movie the other day and now I can't remember the name of it, or I can't remember how it ended. Or I was at a function with some clients last night and I sat next to the same person for 2 hours and now I can't remember their name or where they're from. Or you might have difficulty retrieving old files from the back of your mind and bringing them to the forefront of your mind, like, what was the name of that song and whatever, and you're trying to do that, and we just think, oh, it's because I'm getting older. That's what we always say to ourselves. And actually, that's not necessarily the case. So what they did with these people with a slightly damaged prefrontal cortex, they taught them a technique of mindfulness very similar to that breathing technique that I just showed you before, not too dissimilar to that. It was a pretty long-term commitment to this study. They had to do it for 5 minutes a day for 5 years, every single day for 5 years. And then they took the MRI scans of their brain again, and the results were compelling. The brain had completely regenerated itself. So it was the first set of studies to show that we need to reboot and recharge our brain. At some point, at the end of the day, we need to reboot and recharge our brain. And that's what mindfulness does for us, being able to be mindful, being able to be present, even if it's a mindfulness body technique or breathing technique that can actually just calm your mind down. Some recent studies that just came out at the start of this year actually just showed the equivalent benefit to our prefrontal cortex by just sitting at your desk for 5 minutes not thinking about anything, by going out for a walk for 5 minutes not thinking about anything, being in a park and watching your kids play for 5 minutes not thinking about anything. Whatever it might be, actually that's shown that that's just as effective as breathing or techniques of mindfulness, because we are operating so hard and fast now that our brain literally needs to reboot and recharge and kind of refuel. So we can't always be switched on, is the main message. And there's lots of different types of mindfulness techniques as well, like exercise. For me is mindfulness. If I'm running around, or I'm at the gym, or which I'm not now, or exercising in the park, that's a form of mindfulness. It can even be doing household tasks. If you do the dishes, at least let's focus on just doing the dishes and what's in front of you and doing one thing at a time. It can be breathing, that's a form of mindfulness. It can be having your thinking much more in the here and now, much more in the present. That's a form of mindfulness. So it takes many different forms, but it's much better for our brain to be kind of engaged in techniques of mindfulness. It will make our prefrontal cortex, and we're living a lot longer these days. The studies have shown that if you were born in the year 2007, so that means you're 13, 14 years old, they say that the average lifespan will be about 107 for that generation. So if we're living a lot longer these days, we want to have our prefrontal cortex actually going alongside that to actually be operating at its best for quite a bit of time as well. So that's control. So I hope out of that you've got a little bit of information about some things that you might be able to do with that module around how do I boost those elements of personal control. So let's talk about challenge now. So challenge is around our mindset. What actually can we do with our mindset? And I spoke about this before, this one around having that self-awareness, firstly, that I'm shifting from my stress is helpful into that helpful zone where my performance is accelerated, into harmful. My stress is now harmful, where my performance is actually coming down. And knowing that, having that self-awareness of where are you traveling. Now this one is a very interesting one, because if I use the analogy of a car, if we're driving along in our car and the warning lights are coming on saying I need fuel, I need water, I need petrol, We don't think in our mind, oh, I'll just push on for another 150 kilometres and see if I make it. We don't hesitate to pull over, we refuel, we recharge, and we get back on the road. However, when our warning lights come on, what I've tended to notice about people in high-performing, high-achieving environments is that we do the opposite. Our warning lights are coming on saying, hey, you need oil, you need fuel, you need water, and we do the complete opposite. We put our foot on the accelerator and we drive ourselves harder and faster than what we've ever done before. And then we wonder why the wheels are falling off. We wonder why we're in the breakdown lane. We wonder why we've got to pull over and we can't finish the race. So our body is clever. It's going to give us warning signs to say, hey, you're not tracking so well. You better do something to push yourself back into the zone where stress can be good for you again. And that will be different things to different people. But right now it's just about having that self-awareness, as I spoke about earlier. And people will have different early warning signs. Maybe now just take a moment to pause this video. And I'd like you to write down what your early warning signs are. What does your body give you to tell you you're now shifting from stress is helpful into stress is harmful? Let's jot down a few things right now and pause the video. Okay, so hopefully that little exercise is just giving you a little bit of insight into tuning into that self-awareness. That some people may have those warning signs in the physical department. I always get it in the physical department. I get the flicking eye when I'm really tired or I've been working really hard and I'm feeling, I pushed my body too far. Or I often get mouth ulcers as well. That's often that physical sign. Some people might get breathing changes, heart rate, headaches and migraines, adult acne, psoriasis, skin breakouts, those sorts of things are very, very early warning signs. Muscle aches, muscle pains, I think my back's out, those kinds of things in the physical department, feeling sick or gastrointestinal conditions. It could be behavioural. A lot of people get changes in the behaviour department. I might disconnect, I might pull away. I'm being forgetful, so I'm making more errors in my work. I don't have as much energy. It could be moods. I'm more worrisome, I'm more down, I'm more irritable, I'm more grumpy, I've got more of a short fuse. Or it might be changes in the thinking component around, I'm noticing my thinking is more pessimistic, it's more catastrophizing, it's more rigid, it's more black and white. So whatever it might be, it's just around having that absolute self-awareness is the key to getting good at well-being. Now, I just wanted to introduce you for a moment to stress mindset. And you may even want to really look up a video. And this video, it's on YouTube, so you can Google it and you can get on and have a look. And it's called Making Stress My Friend by Kelly McGonigal. So Kelly McGonigal is a US health psychologist, works out of Harvard University, who's done some really interesting work in this space. But essentially, she sought to answer the question, does our mindset matter? When we have challenges, hurdles, obstacles come towards us, does our mindset matter? And the answer is pretty much yes, it does. So, does it matter if I perceive an event as a challenge, or does it matter if I perceive an event as a threat that's coming towards me? And right now, in COVID-19, for about the first 8 weeks, we perceive so much of a threat around us. And even yesterday, I was doing the shopping in Coles, and I was reaching for the fruit and veg, and somebody else's hand reached in right next to mine, and I just jumped back a bit, and I thought, wow, I'm kind of more hypervigilant than I actually thought, because some level, our brains know there's a threat around us right now. So, and that makes us feel jumpy. It gets our fight or flight reactions, and we can quite easily get spiraled into the anxiety response. So, in a lot of research that's been done out of Harvard University, Kelly McGonigal has got 2 groups, and you can learn a little bit more from the video. Got 2 groups together, and in the first group, or in both groups, she says, you are going into a very stressful situation. And group 1, that's the stress is harmful group, actually the threat response. They are educated. You are going into a very stressful situation. You're going to feel the stress response kick in, the blood pressure, the heart rate, the pounding heart, all those sorts of things. You're going to feel the energy, and it's not going to be good for you. You are going to be zapped of energy. You're going to fall over your words. You're going to forget things. You're going to trip over things. Your performance isn't going to be great. And so that group, firstly, they're primed. Stress is not helpful. Other words, threat response. They go into this very stressful situation, and they have to do a task, and then at the end of the stressful task, they're actually asked to do some cognitive tests. How am I performing on those abilities? And no surprise, the threat is the threat group, the group that go into the stress is harmful, perform really badly on those tests. But what is amazing is that actually how the heart reacts and responds is pretty compelling. Although the blood was pounding and the heart was pumping, the blood flow around the heart remained very constricted. And those people in the stress is harmful group released all the negative stress, like cortisol, which actually we know is really, really bad for our heart. And those people went into states of negative emotion very, very quickly. They get the next group, this challenge group, or stress is helpful group. They prime them. You were going into a very stressful situation. It's exactly the same stressful performance situation. And you are going to feel the stress response kick in. You're going to feel the heart rate, the blood pressure, the pounding heart, dry mouth, the clammy hands. But don't worry about it. Those reactions are going to help you to rise to the challenge. You're going to have energy. You're going to be thinking on your feet. You're going to be operating on all cylinders. You're going to have energy. It's going to help you think more clearly. You're going to be focused. And what they know about that group is that they go in and perform exactly the same test. And that group, not only do they do much better on the performance tests, but firstly they go into positive states of emotion. Not, oh, I love this very stressful situation I'm in. They go into states of self-efficacy. Now, I mentioned self-efficacy before. Self-efficacy is the belief in myself that I can handle it. They went through self-efficacy. I don't like this situation, but I can stand it for 10 minutes, and when I've finished, I'll never have to do it again in my whole life. So that's what self-efficacy actually is. And they studied that group's heart. And the heart was pounding and pumping because they had the blood flow going on. But what was amazing was that the heart's behaviour was very, very different to the previous group. The heart was pounding and pumping, but all the blood vessels around the heart remain open, not constricted. And that was pretty amazing because it mimicked the heart and the heart's behaviour in moments of joy and moments of courage. And they studied the stress hormones released by that group, and that group released all the good stress hormones, the stress hormones that build and contribute to resilience. So it was a pretty profound study that had been replicated quite a few times to show that our mindset matters. How we perceive stressful situations that come to us absolutely matters. If I'm going to tell myself there's a threat around me, guess what? I'm going to be, without us even knowing it, probably constricting all the blood flow around my heart, and I'm going to be feeling not great. And if I tell myself, right, this is a challenge, I might not like this situation that's around me right now, particularly during COVID-19, I might like it, but I'll get through it. I'll take it one day at a time and we'll all come through this together. So they have some little techniques to be able to shift your mindset. So in terms of just a practical technique to use out of that is firstly, acknowledge the stress when you feel it. When you feel the stress response in your body, it's about just acknowledging it, having the self-awareness that you've got the stress response going on, as I said before. Secondly, it's about experiencing the stress response because it's something that you care about. If I didn't care about my performance on this, if I didn't care about my ability to meet this deadline, if I didn't care about all these things, I wouldn't be stressed. So that's really important because it means it's hit on a value system, something that's important to you. And then the third step is around what you do with your energy. So you'll have energy through the stress response. The stress response itself is not harmful to us. It's how we think about it that's harmful. Whether it's a threat or a challenge to us, that is what's harmful. And interesting, in COVID-19, now we're actually all aware of our health and having good immunity, we can actually make ourselves sick. I can get more run down. I can be more vulnerable to a cold or a flu if I'm living in the threat response the whole time and I'm living in that fear response the whole time. So it's not so helpful for us right now, but using our energy wisely. What can I do right now in this moment to be able to help me to achieve my goals? How do I use my energy wisely? And this is what athletes do all the time. If they are going into a Grand Slam tennis match with a threat response going on, chances are they're not going to be performing very well. But if they go into that Grand Slam tennis match with the challenge response going on, right? I've got this opponent, I know they're pretty good, but that's okay. I'll take it one step at a time. I'll rise to the challenge. I'll rise to the occasion. I can handle it. I can come through this time. I can perform at my best. That's the absolute difference. An athlete is not worried about all the things that they might be concerned about, but ultimately they've got no control over. About my opponent that might have won the World Championships in Japan last week, and they're not thinking like that. They're thinking around, right, what can I do right now in this tournament to help me achieve my goal? Right, so I might prioritise my sleep a couple of nights before. I might make sure I'm staying hydrated. I might make sure I'm as fit as I can. I'm doing my drills. I might make sure my mind is focused. Whatever it is, they conserve their energy and to help them to rise to the challenge. So it's around thinking around how can you use that right now? What mindset do you have right now in relation to challenges or hurdles or obstacles around you? And how can you switch that mindset to be more of a helpful response, more of a challenge response? And that's what absolutely makes a difference about the quality of your thinking. And that leads us on to confidence right now in terms of that module around how do we actually boost the quality of our thinking and we can actually have very resilient thinking, because that's a huge component of actually being I always say, an agile reframer. And particularly in COVID-19, how do we get very good agility in our mind to be able to be a constant reframer that can help us to have fit and healthy thinking? So I've already introduced you to this concept of self-efficacy before. I know it's a long word, self-efficacy, falling over myself trying to say it a lot of the time. So self-efficacy, we spoke about before, the belief in myself that I can handle it. It's not about liking it. There's so many things that come our way in life. We're not going to like them, but can I handle it? Can I come through it? Can I take it one step at a time? Yes, the answer is yes. So self-efficacy. A lot of the time, how do you think we get strong self-efficacy beliefs in the first place? Do you know how we get self-efficacy beliefs in the first place? A lot of the time, it's not about sailing through life and having success after success after success. The best way to build self-efficacy is actually having a failure, having a setback, having a challenge, and learning to persevere and overcome it. That's often how you build that muscle of self-efficacy. Just as a little example of this, what we have seen in the last few years, and there's a lot of research on this, that in our general population right now, we have a whole population who are kind of entering the workforce now, and they're very high on self-esteem. I'll be good at this, I can do anything I want, I'll be amazing, but low on self-efficacy, the belief in myself that I can handle it. So as a result, people are entering into the workplace, maybe for the first time in their career. They might be getting some feedback that maybe is not in line with their expectations of themselves, and they're crumbling. They're having very big emotional reactions because my self-esteem is quite shallow. It's quite, it's not a very strong muscle for our resilience, and my self-efficacy is kind of self-esteem is quite surface level, and often that's built on being told you're good at that, being told I got good marks, being told about this. It's not about the self-efficacy where our true resilience comes from. And just as a little example, our society has changed so much in years and years, and all the little things that we used to do that build up our self-efficacy have all been removed. Like, for example, when I was growing up, we would go to a party and we'd play Pass the Parcel. And you just knew that not everyone was a winner. And you didn't have a meltdown if you didn't get a prize, you just had the expectation that not everyone was a winner. And without even knowing it, that little tradition of that party game was flexing our resilience muscle. Or just being able to run a race at school. And sometimes now, when my son was about 5, I remember him playing soccer and they didn't even take scores on who won and who lost. But the funniest thing was all the kids knew exactly the score. But the parents and the umpires were not taking scores because someone might feel bad if they lose. So it's all these little things that we had in life that were stripped back. And now there's a generation which is very high on that self-esteem but low on that self-efficacy. And as a small example, I remember quite a few years ago when my son was 7 years old and he ran in the running race at school and he got second last in that running race. But not only did he get a ribbon for that running race, he got a medal as well. And I went, well, that's totally over the top. And he said to me, oh, I feel really good, Mum, because I've got this medal and I've got this ribbon. I feel good, which is self-esteem. But he said, but Mum, I know I'm not a very good runner. Everybody got a medal and a ribbon, and that's self-efficacy. So that's where you see that pattern So it's around, being able to not succeed every time, trying and then succeeding and pushing through, that actually is the biggest thing for our self-efficacy. And I always say it's about, getting on the horse, falling off the horse and getting back on. But right now, with parenting styles that have changed tremendously in the last 20 or so years, people are not even allowed to fall off the horse. That's the whole thing, is helicopter parenting and preventing people falling off the horse. So self-efficacy beliefs are not actually built up. So that's my little talk on self-efficacy and how we actually build it. So if you do have children, it's okay that they fail, or if they ring up and say they've forgotten their sports uniform, say, okay, well, I can't run it to you now because I'm in the city, and that builds self-efficacy. All right, I'll handle that, I'll survive it, I might get into trouble, but that's okay, I'll take responsibility. So it's around looking at your thinking styles, and it's around coming back to your thinking, your T. Situations will always come towards us in life, and we're always going to have our reaction, our response to those. But our reaction and response is much more determined by the quality of our thinking than the actual situation that's coming to us. That's the biggest determinant of our reaction, is the quality of our thinking. So as I go through and just quickly define some of these thinking styles, it might be worth just having a think about which ones are your favourite ones that you dip into. And we all have our favourite ones. By the time we're about 12 or 13 years old, maybe even a little younger, we actually have little neural pathways to these 9 unhelpful thinking styles. We've got favourite ones, and we go up and down them so many times, we actually have formed a little groove in our brain that suddenly I just need a situation to happen. Oh, I'm a bit worried about this. I go down that path, that other path, that, down that little train goes down the catastrophizing path or the perfectionistic path or whatever path it may be. So the first one is black and white thinking. That's where people behave, very much in terms of it's black or it's white, it's good or it's bad, it's right or it's wrong. So it's very rigid and not very flexible in terms of our thinking style. So we kind of don't see the shades of grey, and not able to work out really shades of grey might actually stress us out. So it's very, very, very black and white. The next one, setting unrealistic expectations or perfectionistic thinking. Now this is one I'm seeing a lot in COVID-19 because people are wearing so many different hats right now. I'm expecting myself to be perfect at my job. I'm expecting myself to be perfect at homeschooling. I'm expecting myself to be the perfect wife or mother or whatever it might be, or friend outside of work. And this is a really interesting thing. So a lot of perfectionists may have a lot of those I must, I should, I have to do this, and maybe personalising. If something hasn't gone right or hasn't gone according to plan, I personalise it. It's all my fault. I beat myself up and give myself a really, really hard time to make me feel better. But it doesn't make us feel better, it just strips us of our confidence. So the perfectionistic beliefs are often very high, might set very high standards for myself, but completely different standards for everybody else, so kind of different benchmarks. And I'm going to beat myself up if I feel as if I'm not achieving those exceptional benchmarks all the time. Looking on the dark side is that pessimistic thinking, which is kind of that glass half empty rather than half full. Overgeneralizing or overgeneralizing is more where we overgeneralize from one situation to another. So I might have been in a situation and I didn't perform so well in that situation. Therefore, the next time I'm in that situation, the same thing's going to happen to me. So that's overgeneralizing from one situation to a brand new one. Making mountains out of molehills or catastrophizing is essentially the same thing, where a common one now during COVID-19, I've got a bit of a sore throat because I've been talking all day and doing back-to-back webinars. I haven't drunk water for a while. That means I'm getting sick. That means I can feel a virus coming on, and then suddenly we've catastrophized and we have this tiny little symptom of a little scratchy throat. Suddenly I'm becoming unwell. That would be an example of catastrophizing, where we go up that ladder of inference very, very quickly. Personalizing, it's all my fault. This is where we might overly assume responsibility for things that are not our fault. So I might get some feedback that's not in line with my expectations. I might spend the whole day beating myself up. Maybe I see a colleague by the elevator and I say good morning and they don't answer me back, and I spend the whole day worried about what have I done? Have I upset them? Have I hurt their feelings? You didn't even notice it. They may have had headphones on and actually just didn't even hear you. So it's where we kind of beat ourselves up for a lot of things. Mistaking feelings for facts. I might feel right now, if I'm learning new technology, I might feel a bit incompetent. Therefore, I am incompetent in everything. I might feel a bit hopeless right now, therefore I am hopeless in everything. So that's where we kind of really we'll get mixed up between how we might feel and take that as a fact and jumping to negative conclusions. I'm seeing this a lot now, especially during COVID-19, where we start to live in the future state. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's interesting that we imagine the future with a negative twist on it. Almost always in our mind has a negative interpretation of it. And when we do a lot of what ifing, generally that inspires anxiety and worry and tension. And if we do a lot of living in the past, it used to be that way, or that used to happen, or whatever, we generate remorse and regret, or I shouldn't have done that and I really should have done this instead. We generate negative emotion when we're spending a lot of time in our future state or in our past state. But it's really interesting that we hardly ever spend much time in our present state, yet the present state is all we've got. So this is coming back to techniques of mindfulness again, around in challenging times and in changing times and in worrying times. One of the best things we can do is remove ourselves from the future state, the what-ifing, dial the volume down on the circle of concern stuff. It will be there, but you've got to dial the volume down on it. Stop thinking about the past stuff and focus on the here and now. And when we focus a lot more on the here and now, this is where we boost to our well-being and our performance is enhanced as well. So they've trained athletes a lot on this technique of mindful thinking. So an athlete is trained very much now not to focus on the future state. Oh, I've won the world championships, I've won the Olympics, I'm picturing myself with the medal around my neck. They used to get athletes to imagine that, to inspire high performance. Guess what? It made the athletes so anxious, their performance dropped off. Or if an athlete's mind went into the past, oh, I'm standing next to so-and-so who won the world championships in Japan last week, I've already lost the race. So now an athlete is taught to have their thinking very much in the here and now. If I'm a swimmer, I'm diving into that pool. I'm perfecting my turn at the end of the pool. I'm maximising my oxygen intake. I'm making sure that my strokes are strong, that I'm in line, that I'm focused. They're not thinking, they're not having their thinking past or future. It's very much just on the here and now. And by mindful thinking, by engaging in that, that's been shown to enhance performance and makes us feel a lot better about ourselves as well. So it does tie into the circle of influence type of content. So for a little exercise, what I'd like you to do is just to pause the video in a moment, and I'd like you to have a think about which are your little unhelpful thinking styles that you might have developed a little well-worn pathway to. And what I'd like you to think of is, what do you do when that little train goes down that little path into that station? You might not be able to stop it from happening, but maybe as it's going on the journey, you might be able to realise, I'm on the journey there and this isn't so great for me. What are the little things that you say to yourself? What are your little mantras? What do you do? How do you keep your thinking in perspective? What do you do to actually fine-tune? And the key to being a resilient thinker is being very agile in your brain, to realise, 1, my thinking's not so helpful right now, and 2, what am I going to do to change it and be agile? So just jot down those couple of things for me now around what are your techniques to keep your thinking fit and healthy. Okay, so now you've done those techniques, I'm going to just share with you a couple. You've probably got some of these there, and you may have had other ones as well. The first one is about thought stopping. So this is a really useful technique when maybe you're at home and you're worried about something that's happened in the past, or maybe you just want to switch off from work and stop thinking about work. Sometimes you've got to and you're having those looping thoughts. I don't know if any of you have ever had those looping thoughts. You go round and round and round, and that's often when we're stuck in negative emotion, and you just got to give yourself a stern talking to. I have often got people to wear an elastic band, and I get them to stop it, like literally, if I'm at home and I want to not think about work, if a challenging situation has come my way and I'm beating myself up about it, maybe if I'm just a catastrophizer and I like to blow things up out of proportion, I'm going to wear an elastic band and flick myself every single time I go into that thinking style, or every single time I start thinking about work when I'm trying to switch off, or every single time I worry about something that has already been and gone and I've worried about it for 3 days beforehand. So it's around just one, it's a very interesting experiment if you just do it for a day. One, it's interesting how many times you actually flick yourself. I think the research shows we have like hundreds of negative thoughts a day, so it's really useful to think how many times do I actually do that. And two, it's a nice reminder, stop it. I'm going to divert my attention, I'm going to do something else to stop thinking about it. What's done is done, what's happened has happened, or I'll devote some time to worrying about it tomorrow. Kind of time, sometimes containing worry time is very useful. Just going, right, tomorrow at 10 o'clock I'm going to allow myself to worry about this for 10 minutes so it doesn't consume me, because that's what negative emotion does. Suddenly we're in it for hours. So thought stopping is useful. Distraction techniques are also useful. That's where you can distract yourself. So you're throwing your attention into something else. So a very useful distraction technique is counting back from 100 by sevens. That is guaranteed to stop any distressing thought process in its tracks. Maybe it's picking up a book and reading something. Maybe it's listening to music. Maybe it's phoning a friend. Maybe it's watching TV, whatever it might be, doing a crossword, something to distract yourself off a particular thought process and diverting it to some other attention task. Challenging negative self-talk is a really great one. Well, what's the evidence that this is going to happen? In fact, what's the evidence that actually, what is the evidence that I'm actually going to get sick because I've got this little dry throat? Well, maybe not much. I've been self-isolating, I've been socially distancing, I've been practicing hand hygiene. In fact, I haven't been around many people. What's the evidence actually against that I actually am well? Well, I've actually only had it for about 2 minutes. I actually have not got any other symptoms. So it's about challenging your thinking style that you're delving into there. What else can I think right now? You know, what else can I think instead? What's the worst thing that can happen, and what's the most likely thing that's going to happen? That's one of my favourite things, allowing yourself to think, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I might get sick, and sure, maybe I'll have to go into hospital for a little bit, but what's the most likely thing to happen to me? Well, I'll probably get some symptoms. I'm pretty fit and healthy. I'm in a kind of not in a high risk age group. I'll probably be sick for a while, but I will look after myself and I'll get through this. So it's around actually being good at challenging it and replacing a thought with something more realistic, not positive, something realistic that's grounded in more reality. And it's okay to not like something. I don't like this challenging time I'm in right now, but I'll get through it, or I'll take it one step at a time. That's that self-efficacy. And perspective taking. You know, certainly it's around, well, how can I actually, I'm seeing a lot of people now have a lot of perspective taking and a lot of gratitude. That, gee, I'm so fortunate that I've got a job where I can quickly pivot and work from home. I'm so grateful that I've got a job where I'm not frontline facing people. I'm not in the firing line every single day. I'm so grateful that I've got a job. You know, it's that perspective taking. And I always think it's about keeping our reactions in perspective. Am I reacting to this little issue on an email like a 10 out of 10 on the stress scale? Maybe it's really about a 3 on the stress scale. So let's keep my reactions in perspective to that. Really important. So the key for resilient thinking is around being a very, very good reframer and using those active strategies. And you may even have more active strategies that you use currently. And, you know, even after today, you can kind of look at any of those, any techniques. There's a lot of techniques for mindful thinking, keeping your thinking in the here and now and present, so you're not going up that ladder of inference. But this is my last technique to show you, and it's one of my favourite ones. It's called mindful gaps. And it's around, especially now, when we don't have many gaps in our day, when we're working from home and we're transitioning quite quickly from work to our personal life with not much of a gap. You know, we literally can walk out of our study and so we're in our life. So we're not actually having many gaps. And this is a really nice one, particularly for negative emotion or just a busy day, or even to transition from your work life into your personal life. And it involves a little bit of mindfulness and a little bit of kind of resetting your mind as well. So often, as I said before, we quite like negative emotion, and it sticks to us like Teflon. It kind of follows us around from situation to situation. So I don't know if you've ever had a day where a hurdle, a challenge or an obstacle has come your way at 9 a.m. and you've taken that negative emotion onto that phone call, onto that conversation with a student, onto that, into your next meeting, all the way home and into your front door, and then at midnight you're wide awake and you can't sleep. And the more we drag negative emotion through the day, the bigger it gets. So suddenly at midnight, it's very powerful. That's what happens with negative emotion. So if we've got one of those days to keep our well-being topped up, it might not necessarily be negative emotion, but it might just be a busy day. Sometimes I am literally doing this technique in the elevator, going from client to client if I don't have much of a gap. It's what you're doing in between that's really important, even in between task to task or work to home. That's that opportunity to actually put in a mindful gap, because otherwise no gaps exist. So digest could be, okay, I've had that challenge come my way, but right now I've got to go in and present to 10 people. Who do I want to? I'm going to take my 5 deep breaths. My physiology affects my psychology. I'm going to take my 5 deep breaths, longer if I've got a bit more time, and reset myself. Right, I'm going in to present to 10 people right now. Who do I want to be when I walk in that room? What do I want to showcase? What do I want to give to this group? Or I've got a meeting right now. What do I want to bring? What do I take in? What do I want to recalibrate and reset myself as? Who do I want to be? What do I want to showcase? And it's very intentional resetting myself, so I'm not dragging that negative or just a busy time from one situation into the next. That can actually help us to finish the day with a little bit more fuel left in the tank, so we're not feeling so depleted in our well-being. And it's a really helpful technique to be able to use as we're transitioning from work to home, to be able to put in that gap. And especially now we're being more conscious, need to be more conscious about that when we're working from home, and it's a little bit more challenging. So digest might be, okay, I did this today, but I didn't get to these 10 things. I'm going to write a to-do list before I leave my study. I'm going to switch off my computer. I'm going to shut the door if I can. I'm going to block out that workspace. And maybe rest. I'm just going to sit at this desk and do 5 minutes of deep breathing before I walk out into my lounge room with my rest of my life. Or I'm going to walk around the block to take a break. Or I'm going to just do some exercise. Or I'm just going to have some time for myself. Whatever it might be, what am I doing to rest and recalibrate? Okay, I'm about to enter into the rest of my life now. Who do I want to be in that life? What do I want to showcase? What do I want to bring to that? Do I want to kind of come in tired and fatigued and grumpy and irritable? Or do I want to have a bit of energy? Do I want to be present? Do I want to be focused? Do I want to give to those who are around me? And again, it's that intentional resetting. So athletes are taught this technique all the time. If they are in a Grand Slam tennis match, using that example, and they've just hit a double fault, and they've got one more shot left, they have a second to do this. They know if they take that negative emotion from that last shot into the future shot, they're going to lose the tournament. Even a golfer, if they've hit the ball into a bunker, they maybe have 5 minutes to be able to reset themselves, to recalibrate themselves for their next shot. Right, who am I going to be? What do I want to be when I take that next shot? And it's exactly the same for us in our performance situations, whether it be personal or our work lives. So that brings me to the end of the session today. And as I said at the start, I'm just going to throw out there, we've covered a lot of information today under those 4 elements of mental fitness around control. How can I boost some of those elements of personal control? Challenge, does my mindset matter? How do I change my mindset and have an agile mind? Some techniques to boost confidence. What can I do to actually work on healthy thinking and resilient thinking and being an agile thinker? And finally, as I threw out there at the start, what's your one thing? What's your one thing you are prepared from today to shift from that knowing department into that doing department? Maybe it's something that resonated with you. Maybe it's a habit that you've always thought, oh, I'd really love to get into mindfulness and I've never done it before. Or actually I'm going to use that mindful gaps. Or I'm going to be really focused every single day on connection with my colleagues this for the next little while. Whatever it may be, we will only get benefit for this topic of resilience and well-being if you get good at transferring one thing from knowing into doing. So I'd like you just to spend some time after this session just completing this little action plan and holding yourself accountable, or even finding a buddy that maybe has watched this video as well. If you're doing this as a group, maybe buddy up, hold each other accountable, have a check-in every month and see where you're at with your wellbeing goal. And once you get good at putting one habit into place, work on another one, swap it up, change it up, and kind of work on another habit and another wellbeing goal. Thank you so much for participating in the session today. I hope you found it very useful. If you do have any further questions about this, you can see our contact details are there. Don't hesitate to reach out. And also, if you do want some assistance in really putting a personal action plan for your wellbeing into practice, you've always got the services of your employee assistance program, and the details of that program are on your intranet. Thank you so much. Bye.